started with the silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that gently wakes you after a good night's sleep. It was the kind that presses against your ears, like cotton stuffed too deep, the kind that makes you realize something is wrong before you've even opened your eyes. That was the morning Helen Dawson, 67, knew her world had changed. Helen had lived in the same house for 31 years, tucked along a tree-lined street in a modest neighborhood of Asheville. The morning sun had always spilled across the wood floors like a familiar friend, the radiator clicking awake in its usual rhythm, birds chirping from the maple outside her bedroom. But this morning there were no clicks, no birds, no light creeping through the curtains, just the heavy silence of absence. She sat up, squinting into the dim room. The clock on her nightstand was blank. Power outage, she thought, already reaching to pull on her robe. But when her feet touched the floor, the cold hit harder than usual. Her rug was missing. In fact, the entire room looked barren. Her heart stumbled. She stood and turned slowly. No dresser, no chair, no wedding photo of her and Robert. The wall where it had hung was pale, a clean rectangle surrounded by a darker, dustier shade. She opened the closet, empty, not just of clothes but of memory. She moved through the house, each step revealing more of what had vanished. No couch, no coffee maker, no stacks of letters she hadn't had the heart to throw away. Her life had been cleared out, as if someone had packed it all up and left only the shell behind. It wasn't a robbery, that much was clear. There was no sign of intrusion, no mess, no broken window, just absence. She walked barefoot into the kitchen, her breath fogging in the air. The house was cold, too cold. Her hand went to the thermostat but the unit was gone. She laughed, a dry, quiet thing that felt foreign in her throat. Was this some elaborate prank? Had she forgotten something? But the truth was louder than denial. It hadn't been taken from her. She had let it go, one piece at a time, over years and years of forgetting what mattered. The photos she hadn't looked at in years, boxed. The dishes too nice to use, given away. The piano Robert had bought her after she retired, sold when the roof needed fixing. It wasn't someone else who had done this. It was her. She slumped down on the floor, bare wood cold beneath her. She couldn't even cry, she'd forgotten how. That's what happens when you spend too long surviving instead of living. 4 years after Robert died, Helen had built walls instead of memories. She filled her time with errands, made sure her schedule stayed full enough to avoid stillness. Stillness had always reminded her of what she'd lost. The quiet was unbearable, so she drowned it in noise. And yet here she was. The noise gone. The distractions gone. Just her in a hollow house, stripped bare like her soul. That was when she saw it. One thing remained. On the kitchen counter sat a small, paint-splattered jar. Inside were a few dried brushes and a faded photo of a watercolor she had once painted, a field of poppies. Robert had framed it the day she finished it. "It looks like how you smile," he'd said. Helen reached for the jar as if it were a lifeline. Her hands shook, not from cold but from memory. She hadn't painted in over a decade. Not since the funeral. The next hours unfolded in strange silence, but it didn't feel oppressive anymore. Felt open. The kind of silence you need to begin again. She found a box of old paints in the garage. Crusted, forgotten, but still usable. She sat in the sunroom, knees tucked beneath her like a child, brush in hand, heart thudding with unfamiliar anticipation. The first stroke was shaky. The second stronger. The third felt like breathing. Helen painted until her hand cramped and the sun dipped low. She didn't know what she was creating, only that it was hers. The next day she painted again. And again the day after. Neighbors began to notice the shift. A light on in the studio window. The smell of turpentine drifting out into the street. A woman at the hardware store buying brushes and primer with paint on her fingers. Helen wasn't hidden anymore. Then came the knock. It was a Saturday morning when a young woman named Clara appeared on her doorstep. She'd seen Helen's artwork online. Her niece had posted a photo after visiting. "Would you teach me?" Clara had asked, holding up a tiny canvas and a timid smile. Helen didn't hesitate. 1 became 2. 2 became 6. And soon Helen's sunroom was filled with women of all ages, all stories, all carrying their own invisible emptiness. They painted. They laughed. They cried into the brushstrokes. What began as loss had become life again. And Helen, she filled the house again. Not with furniture or antiques, but with purpose, with noise, with community. She never refilled it with what had been lost, but with something entirely new. And she never forgot the morning it all disappeared. Because it was the morning she finally woke up.